So, what if I told you that the biggest mysteries in all of science, from the absolute weirdness of quantum particles all the way to the nature of our own consciousness, could be explained by one single idea? Well, that's the incredible claim of a new theory we're going to dive into today. And it all starts by completely rethinking the so-called empty space that surrounds literally everything. All right, to get our heads around this, let's start with a really bizarre fact that sits right at the heart of modern physics. For almost 100 years now, we've been using this one rule to predict how the quantum world works, and it's been flawlessly accurate. But here's the catch. Nobody's ever been able to explain why it actually works. And this is it. This little equation right here is the Born rule. All it really says is that to figure out the probability of finding a particle somewhere, you take its wave function, that's the Greek letter psi, and you square its amplitude. The problem? Well, the guy who came up with it, Max Born, flat out admitted it was just a guess. A really, really good guess that always seems to work, for sure, but still, just a guess, not something that comes from any deeper principle. And that really is the core of the whole mystery. Why amplitude squared? I mean, why not just the amplitude, or the amplitude cubed, or some other number? Standard quantum mechanics just doesn't have an answer. It's basically a rule we're told to just accept because it gets the right results. And that is the exact problem this new theory wants to finally solve. So that new theory is called dynamic vacuum field theory, or DVFT for short, and its answer is pretty radical. It suggests that the vacuum of empty space isn't empty at all. In fact, it has a secret identity, and figuring out what that is, well, that's the key to everything. What DVFT says is that the quantum wave function isn't just a bunch of math on a page. It's describing a real, physical field that makes up everything in the universe. Imagine it's like a universal ocean, and this ocean has two fundamental properties. It has a depth, which the theory calls amplitude, and this is what gives things substance and mass, and it has currents, which it calls phase, and this is what controls how things move and interact. Okay, so let's zoom in on that first part, the amplitude. This is the depth of our cosmic ocean. It's a measure of the field's density. You could even say its stiffness. This is what allows matter to actually exist, to have mass, to be in one place. You can almost think of it as the field's memory, its stable, lasting structure. And then you have the second part, the phase. These are the currents flowing through our ocean. This component is all about motion, time, and all that famous quantum weirdness, like interference, where a single particle seems to explore all possible paths at the same time. So if amplitude is the field's memory, phase is like its active, exploratory mind. And here is where it all clicks into place. See, DVFT doesn't just guess the Born rule, it actually derives it from physical principles. The logic is actually pretty straightforward. Step 1. The energy in the field is stored in its amplitude. And it turns out the energy density is proportional to the amplitude squared. Step 2. Making a measurement isn't some magical act. It's just the moment where the field's currents, its phase, lock into a stable configuration. And that can only happen where there's enough energy to do it. So the conclusion is kind of unavoidable. The probability of finding a particle is just highest where the energy is highest, which is where the amplitude is squared. Bam! No guess required. This totally flips the old way of thinking on its head. The Born rule isn't really a rule about random chance or abstract probability at all. It's a physical law about energy. A particle shows up where the vacuum field has enough energy for its wild exploring phase to finally settle down and anchor itself into what we call a single, stable reality. Now, this same idea also gives us a really beautiful explanation for another one of the biggest puzzles in physics. Why it feels like we live in two totally different worlds. The fuzzy, weird quantum world of possibilities and the solid, predictable classical world of certainty. According to DVFT, these aren't separate realities. Not at all. They're just two different behaviors of the exact same field. You can see it right here in the table. When the field's phase is all synchronized and coherent, you get the quantum world. Things act like waves, they can be in many places at once, they're full of possibility. But when that coherence gets broken, the amplitude part takes over, and it forms these dense, stable knots of energy that we experience as solid, classical objects. This is such a profound statement from the theory. Think about what it's saying. The normal, classical world that you and I see every day, it isn't the fundamental state of reality. It's what happens when a system just gets too big, too messy, and too noisy, and it loses its deep quantum coherence. It's a failure mode. Our reality is a broken version of a deeper one. And here's a really powerful way to wrap all that up. Quantum behavior, the The part governed by phase, it's like the vacuum thinking, exploring every possibility. And classical behavior, governed by amplitude, that's the vacuum remembering, storing information in stable structures. It's one field doing two amazing jobs, creating and preserving. And now we get to the most mind-bending leap in this entire theory, because DVFT takes this exact same logic, this dance between phase and amplitude, between coherence and decoherence, and applies it to the ultimate mystery, consciousness itself. The central idea here is that consciousness isn't some kind of magic spark or a ghost in the machine. It's a physical process. It's what you get when you have a highly organized, stable pattern of phase coherence, those synchronized currents we were talking about, that's being maintained inside a biological system, like a brain. And this immediately means that consciousness isn't just an on or off switch. It has to be a whole spectrum of complexity. And if you look at it that way, you naturally get this amazing hierarchy of experience. A single particle? It has no real coherence to speak of, but a single cell might have a tiny fleeting bit, something you could call proto-experience. As life gets more complex, so does the architecture of that phase coherence, leading up through insects to mammals with their rich emotional lives, all the way up to the recursive, self-aware consciousness that we humans experience. So, what is it that makes human consciousness feel so unique? Well, according to DFT, it's not a different ingredient, it's a different architecture. Our brains evolved this incredible trick, the ability to create phase patterns that represent other phase patterns. This creates a recursive loop, the feeling of I know that I know. And we take these unbelievably complex states and we compress them into symbols, which we call language. And this leads to a really powerful and frankly humbling conclusion. Humans aren't special because we were somehow given the gift of consciousness. We're special because our brains evolved a new and fantastically complex way to structure the phase of the underlying vacuum field. In this view, consciousness is a fundamental property of the universe itself, just waiting for the right kind of architecture to come along and express it. Okay, so let's just step back for a second and look at the new map of reality that this theory is really proposing. It's trying to connect the dots all the way from the most basic rule of physics right up to our own subjective experience of being alive. This table really shows the payoff. Look at all the weirdest parts of quantum mechanics. That unexplained probability rule, the mysterious collapse of the wave function, the special role of an observer. They're no longer these strange, arbitrary rules you just have to accept. DVFT replaces every single one with a concrete physical process. Wave collapse is just the field losing its phase coherence. Probability is just about where the energy is. It's all just the normal, everyday behavior of one single field. And this all leads to a truly staggering final insight. If consciousness is just a complex phase architecture, then you can see all of life, all of evolution, all of human thought as the process by which the fundamental field of the universe gradually organized itself into a state complex enough to become aware of its own existence. And that leaves us with one last, really provocative question. If this cosmic process of self-observation is still going on through us, through our science, our technology, our collective intelligence, what is the universe learning about itself right now?